I was going to say, bear in mind that I'm absolutely brain dead.
That's all right.
Okay.
And welcome to this Open Security Summit session with me and Eliza. We're going to be talking about using Elastic and Kibana, right, for instance response. And there's a couple of interesting ones that we've done in this summit around this sort of trying to create, I would say, almost a community to share knowledge, real world knowledge about how to use these tools that we all, a lot of us use in security. So, again, for the crowd watching, right, let's do a lot more of these where, if you are an active user, if you active use Elastic, or if you're part of AWS who's doing open source, or part of the Elastic development team, or main Elastic, or even a power user, let's come up with more panels on this. So we're going to do a nice, quick, just talk about some of me and Eliza's experience on Elastic and how we use it and how insanely powerful it can be. And then we'll take it from there. So yeah, I'm Dinis. I actually use Elastic for quite a long time. I'm a big fan. Eliza, quick intro on you.
I'm Eliza-May Austin. I run a security company called That Security Company, with a subsidiary brand called Pocket Team. And we specialize in putting open source technologies into businesses for various different security purposes. And then the service around that is making sure it sort of fits their business need, their business requirements, and their security need. So a great example of that is, we were just talking about Elastic. So a great example of that is using, the data that's in Elastic represented in a way in Kibana through dashboards and stuff like that can represent the security nuances of a particular company. So, for example, having a company, let's say a medical company in the US versus a medical company in the UK, such as the NHS, completely different use cases, because one's a target of financial attack and the other one is a target of more like disruption or like trying to harm people. And so their reflections in a Kibana dashboard to the data in Elastic is going to be significantly different. So we specialize in putting those things in place, setting them up with that, and then building those use cases into those dashboards and stuff like that.
Cool. So from a point of view that you use the Elastic stack, right? So you use the open source
the
part
whole
of
thing.
the Elastic stack, the whole
log stack,
of it, right?
everything, the whole thing, yeah.
Yeah, which is it has insanely powerful, right? It's one of the I think. From the open source sort of tool stack, right? It's quite incredible. Like I love the fact that you could just spin up a Docker, right, and just run it here, but also you can run it in production. You can run it in highly distributed and resilient environments, right? Models.
It's game changing. So I think that the barrier to entry in cybersecurity, logging and monitoring, and sort of understanding your own infrastructure from a SIEM perspective is quite hard. It's quite high, sorry. So the barrier to entry is quite high. It's quite expensive as well. So sometimes we get people that come to us and say, we're using this particular tool, which is like a glorified log aggregator that's been sold to them as a SIEM, and we're comfortable using it, but it's just so expensive and we're coming up for a new one. We don't know what to do. Can you give us any advice? And they're not necessarily coming to us for SIEM, but they might be coming to us for some advice. And we'll say, well, have you had a look at Elk? Because it's basically the same thing, but free. And sometimes they're like, what? And they've never even heard of it. And you think, yeah, okay, with Splunk, for example, great tool. You can create dashboards in it, you can do searches in it, and you can, you can create like custom parsers and all this. You can do all that with Elk as well.
So in terms of the patterns, right? So there is, I guess, there's the typical enterprise one where it's like it becomes almost a pet, right? You have to maintain it. It's the big boy, right? You use it to send lots of data, and you send data directly to it, right? Mm-hmm. And then there's, I think, the other pattern where you store all the data, for example, in things like S3 or blob storage or more persistent storage, and you just pump that or a subset of that, right, into Elastic, and then you have the ability to reload that. And then I guess you got one of my favorite ones is also when you almost use it on demand, where you load specific data sets that you want. So, in your experience, right, you kind of use probably the first two a lot, right? So you got the ones that you set up once and you keep pumping the logs all the time. And then do you have others that, for example, just also use the S3 to then filter that and then send a subset of it to Elastic?
Really just totally depends whatever the customer wants.
Yeah.
So, if they're a AWS house and they want you to use S3 buckets, it's really good. So for example, I mean, with Elastic, they've picked a great name for that product because it is elastic. It will work with pretty much anything. If you can throw something at it, it can read it, or you can pretty easily build a parser to read it. When it comes to storage of data, you know, I am not the architect of this. However, I'm just going on the bits that I know. Thankfully, you'll be happy to know we actually have people that know what they're doing in our company. So yeah, some companies want to go down the S3 bucket route. Doesn't really make a great deal of difference in terms of added complexity, but the whole point of the Logstash component to it is that you aren't overloading the sort of console itself. When I say console, I mean like Kibana, the Kibana interface, the dashboards. So, you know, when you're looking at that and you're putting your search queries in, rather than it pulling that information from the machine that it is on, it is pulling it from Logstash. So you've got that sort of resiliency in terms of availability and usability. Anyway, I'm genuinely not, I'm not an advert for Elk or for Elastic. I don't work there. It's just something I've used from early on in my career, and I can see that it's great, and I can see there's a lot of commercial tools out there which command a lot of money, and they either aren't as good or they're on par, and they're heavily inspired by Elastic. So why not, you know, push the original? And they do have like I genuinely don't work there, but they do have commercial models as well that are like, if you know, there's some companies out there that say we're not allowed to go open source, we have to use something that's, you know, commercially backed and all this, you know, crud, in which case you can just say, well, go over there and make an introduction to someone at Elastic, or point them
because they have a commercial model. And I think that's quite popular these days. You have the open source element.
We don't do that. We don't resell anything. So we don't like, if someone's like, well, we have to have a product that is, you know, like licensed and all this stuff, we'll go, that's fantastic. Here's the site for Elastic.
So I also think that there's a play here for teams and individuals to learn how to use Elastic in small subsets. So I've used before, for example, an instance response, where I would or a particular analysis, because one of the things that I like to think of Elastic is that it's like index all. So basically you send a bit of JSON to it and it will index everything. So now you can query against everything. So it's actually a great graph database, ironically. I actually use it for a lot of graphs because I can send the JSON, which is basically a flat graph, and then I can query it insanely fast, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's like, you know, it's like any major log aggregator in that sense, that you can use it for anything. You could use it for like metrics from a particular website for marketing purposes. You could use it for, there's loads of stuff you could use it for, but a really strong use case is cybersecurity and custom dashboards.
And Kibana, you know, is a hell of a tool, right? Like, especially the Lens. I think they really made a great job. The previous one was a bit cumbersome, but now Lens is so sweet to create visualizations.
Oh no, it's great. It's great. It plugs in really nicely to things like Security Onion as well. So people now with companies like Elastic and Security Onion, you know, and Moloch and stuff that create these open source tools, they are like we said earlier on in the week, they are democratizing. I can't even say the word. You know what I'm trying to say. They're making cybersecurity tooling accessible to the masses, and the only problem then becomes we need someone to configure it and maintain it for us, and that's significantly more cost effective and accessible than here's this big SaaS product and you can't manage it without us and you need to pay us all this money and blah, blah, blah. And it just sort of takes that away from huge vendors and gives smaller companies with a little bit more, you know, pragmatism the opportunity.
No, I highly recommend any instance response team to have that in their back pocket, right? And even, I would say, even teams who have Splunk, right? Even teams who have other tools, I feel there's a space, even if you just want to experiment a little bit or use, I think there's a space to customize data and to use Elastic capability, especially open source. Like you can fire up, I've done things where I literally fire up a local Elastic, right? Running on Docker on my laptop, pump in a bunch of JSON, which I now have all my APIs to do it, and use it to analyze data. And now it's still more effective than anything else I could do. And I could slice the data, I could break the data, I can send it. And even if you just, as long as it's sub 1 million, 2 million records, elastic results are almost in real time. So you get a huge amount of performance out of a data set, right? That, for example, you need to investigate or you want to do an analysis. It's a great tool to do.
I know a lot of incident responders do that with Splunk as well, which is same sort of thing.
Yeah.
They'll get, you know, like the free version. I think I don't know what it is now because I've not used it in a long time, but it was like 500 megabytes or something like that. You got something that's completely complicated and a big dump of information. You can put it in there and it'll make it look pretty. Same thing. You can do the same thing with Elastic.
Yeah.
It's really, really awesome. I'm always amazed at the fact that universities don't use it.
Yeah.
Like universities should be all over this shit.
Yeah, I agree. You know, and but I think it's one of those that you need to also have a culture of wanting to analyze data. You want to have a culture of manipulating stuff, right? And especially when you add notebooks, right? You know, if you can start to use notebooks to create some of the Jupyter notebooks, right? It's insanely powerful. Okay, what about the other things? Like, for example, how much have you explored the machine learning elements of Elastic? Because there's some really great functionality that comes almost out of the box that gives you patterns, give you outliers, give you stuff. Have you experimented a lot with those?
I am totally the wrong person to ask.
Okay.
And I feel like a charlatan. I shouldn't be on this call now. You've asked me that. That I would have to ask a friend, i.e. Stephen, Callum, and our head of engineering, our new one.
Enough. Okay, that's fair enough. I guess another topic is there's a new interesting development here, which is AWS, right? So AWS, and you know, I'm going to say on the record, right? I think I'm not sure Elastic made the best move to, and I know AWS probably didn't help, but you know, it's an interesting situation now where you now have AWS pushing OpenSearch, which is, I think AWS realized that the power of a technology like Elastic, right? The power of a very super efficient time series database that can also be used for other things like graph database and etc. So now you have you know, in addition to your, you know, saying like why people not using this technology, the fact that AWS enters this space also means that you know, once you have a platform that knows how to, for example, use Beats and Logstash and or other ways directly to Elastic, knows how to talk to Elastic Stack, you can not just send it to the open source version. You can send it to the enterprise version of Elastic, but you can send it to AWS, right? Which is now taking it to much more native than the integration that they were doing before, which is a very interesting move, right? And I think it's going to push a lot of innovation. And also, I think, you know, because they forked it, so the AWS OpenSearch is a fork of that. And then the question is, you know, how much of that is actually, you know, what's the new features and capabilities they're going to be driving?
So I feel like you know a lot of the inside gossip there. I can tell from your face, you're like, I know how pissed off they are about this. But
well,
yeah.
it's not just me. Like, you can Google it, right? There's literally there was a bit of a spat between them, right? Where they were best friends, then they broke up, and then they were friends again, and they're frenemies, right? And I haven't seen if anything changed in the last couple of months, but I think it's an interesting evolution, right? Because also going to the fact that you have a stack, you know, what I think, you know, even for my team, I think there's space for specific technologies, and I think the ability of quickly creating environments that are insanely powerful to analyze data or to create stations of multiple bits, like you can do certain pockets or even a specific, very specialized set of skills or so now that you want to do. I think it's a bit like people use freaking spreadsheets, right? That's what I'm saying. Like, if you're going to freaking use a spreadsheet, use Elastic, right? Because actually it's still a spreadsheet, right? It's just that, you know, the capabilities, the analysis, like, and again, like you query insanely fast. Like, for example, Jira is like, you fucking send a query to Jira, it takes you 200, 500, 3 seconds, 5 seconds to get a fucking query, right? You send the same query to Elastic, it takes 30 milliseconds. Not being funny, like, you know, I've done that where I pump all the data from Jira to Elastic, and then I query Jira in Elastic, right? And it's so much more efficient.
Yeah. Yeah, I do think the speed and the agility of it as well, it can help, you know, during incident manage, sorry, I am stupid today, I do apologize. During incident response, having So there's a lot of companies out there that they don't really care about security, but they want to dump all their data somewhere because of GDPR or whatever. So this kind of thing is a really good stepping stone for them to get to that point where they're putting all their data somewhere. They don't give a shit about security because there's not a great deal of tight regulation on them. And they'll say, what do you recommend? And you go, Elastic. You use Logstash, like use Elk. Then when it comes to an incident and they ring you, these aren't our SIEM customers, by the way. But they'll ring you during an incident. They'll go, we have no idea what to do. Where do we start? And you'll go, right, well, let's just start with some queries. Let's have a look. And you can piece it together like that. And there's almost a sigh of relief. And I think that I've come across companies before that have had a powerful SIEM, a really expensive like commercial SIEM. Fantastic, great, good on you. That's fantastic. But they've thought, right, we've handed the money over. We've got that. We're good. Nothing's going to hurt us now. Then they get attacked and realize, oh yeah, we had to maintain that thing, and also we don't have any custom queries and we don't know how to use it. And maybe they had it built internally and it's bricked because they've been hit by ransomware, all this stuff, whatever. I might be going on a tangent here, but when it comes to just having logging data, which I'm not a massive advocate of. I love PCAPs and I love endpoint information, but just storing all your logs in a central place does give you that freedom to then retrospectively go back and try and work out what happened when something occurs. So even though on its own it's not a security tool, and this is what I will tell people if they go, what should we use for our logs? I'll say it's not a security tool, but you can grow on it, you can develop with it, and you can manipulate the data in such a way that it can be presented to you in a security way when you get to that point of maturity where you start to give a shit about security. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, right. And look, the more pockets of that data is being collected, the easier is it to pick up the pieces, right? And again, people store information left, right, and center. Even if they normalize, it says you put it in the Elastic Stack or put it in a way that can be consumed by Elastic, right? Which is why I really like the whole S3 or storage to Elastic, because it means that you can almost treat the Elastic environment almost as disposable, and you can program it, you can bring it up and down, but almost only load the data. So instead of doing the game of let's put more and more and more data into these massive beasts, I don't know, just send the data you need, and if you need more, you can just go and see them later, right? So cool. Look, I think we can keep this one short and sweet. I think clearly there's lots of cool topics we want to talk about Elastic. I think what would be cool is to do a couple more panels where we bring people from Elastic, people from AWS and everything, right? But also some more practitioners and other companies and other colleagues of ours that are actually using Elastic, and maybe start to some good practices of some of the dashboards, what really work, what really doesn't work, some of the integrations that make a massive difference, so that we can inspire hopefully a lot of teams to start using this, right?
You should get someone from Security Onion on a panel.
Okay.
Because they have configured their operating system to natively just work with Elastic, which is awesome.
Cool. Well, there you go. Here's the invite, right? Let me know who to send this video to. And
Philip Anchora.
There you go. Here's the invite. Brilliant. All right, Eliza, we'll keep you short today. This is brilliant. Great talking to you.
Thank you for having me. I'm going to go to sleep.
Bye. Bye.